Dear guests, welcome everybody. How's everybody feeling? Awesome? Really? Are you really feeling awesome? What happened?
Oh, I'm just in a good state of mind. I mean,
And you came to a night to talk about climate change, making agreements, and you're feeling awesome. Let's measure how he feels after this night. No, I'm kidding. Thank you for being here, as I hope that we are all from different domains, maybe worrying or working on climate change, and then interested in how do we actually make agreements regarding climate change. Is still everybody at the right page, in the right event? Yeah, great. Well, the program team organized a beautiful night, which is quite easily actually. It's 2 parts. We have a conversation about how does that actually come into practice, making agreements on climate change. And then the second part, how can we actually change that? How can we improve it? Could we also do it differently and maybe with a totally different plan? And we have some designers in the audience, I believe. Do we have some designers? Show yourselves. Yeah, great. Well, these nights, this is an unexpected encounter, and it's number 5. And I'm very honored to be here as a moderator. My name is Marcia Simon, because what we want is these events to be very interactive. So we invite you to intrude into the conversation, really ask your questions up out loud, be really a part of it. So because we are creating this knowledge together to actually know how to move forward together in the right direction, right? This event is part of a bigger research program, and Pakhuis de Zwijger collaborated with Foundation We Are and Social Design Showdown. It's a longer research project, and I would like first Cornelia Dimitrova to get here and introduce this beautiful project. Cornelia Dimitrova.
I think we're on. Good evening. Well, this is the 5th event of the series, and the series has been kind of devised in our brains as a space in which we can peek into the practices of other professions, because the project that Marcia just mentioned is called Collaborations for Future. 10 designers, 10 scientists got 9 months to do whatever they thought was worth doing. And of course, the danger of that is that people might start thinking that climate change is either going to be solved creatively or scientifically. And the truth is, it's neither of those. It's also going to be emotionally and politically and economically. So we didn't want to end up in a binary of these 2 ways of knowing about the world. So that's why we set up the program. This is the final one. How do we make agreements? I want to tell you more about the project. I want to tell you more about the foundation. What do? We bring people from other disciplines to work together with designers, to actually experiment how we should be working together, how we might innovate together on some of those wicked problems we know. So, Collaborations for Future was born about 2 years ago with that curiosity. This funding came from the Ministry of Education, Science and Culture, and the question was, okay, COVID hit the cultural sector exceptionally hard. How can we innovate our professions, our practices, our ways of working, our ways of collaborating? We proposed this project, which was all about experimenting together. I want to show you 3 projects, because we're now, well, at the end of it. It's actually quite interesting how this journey went, but we're now, all these 10 collaborations are almost over. Everybody's preparing to present their work at this Design Week. But I want to show you just 3 projects of what might happen when you just give people the space to do whatever they think is worth doing, and when you don't tell them in advance to pitch an outcome, to promise an impact, or to mitigate a risk. There's always going to be a risk. That's the thing with climate change. We just do not know exactly how the cookie will crumble, but it will crumble, and we better know how to deal with it together. And that takes practice. It actually takes practice to be a good collaborator, to know how to empathize with somebody from another domain, what things they value, what things they're curious about, what do they think about when they think, hey, I did my job well. The first project I want to show you is the collaboration between Mathilde Stolfa, an architect, and Haley Danielson-Ovchinski, a marine biologist. They describe their collaboration as something that became most of all a friendship. They worked very well together. Their practices were so similar. They both worked with going into the field, collecting materials, samples, documenting them, making sense of them. One of them does it aesthetically, narratively. The other one does it scientifically. But at that conceptual level, they both knew very well why they're standing on that beach on that day. And that, I think, is such a strong point to collaborate with someone from. Another project is the one of Carl and Frank. Now, Frank has 35 years of experience under his belt. He knows everything you can know about the future of how the Dutch climate will be, how the climate will be in the Netherlands. And he collaborated with Carl. Carl works a lot with bottom-up movements, open source software. And I really thought they were going to make something very intriguing, some kind of device, some kind of software, some kind of piece of technology. Instead, what they did is they started a movement within KNME. Their first idea was, let's develop a game, let's develop a tool that makes other people more aware of their emissions. So they might change their behavior. And then when you have a group of people, 500 people working at KNME, who are so aware of the urgency, you might think, set an example before you point your fingers. And then there's one more project I want to show you, and that is this one.
So this is one of the first ice creams that comes from the mold. Let's give it a try. Ooh, it's really salty. But I think it's also good that it's a bit too salty because, I don't know, it should also not be too much fun, right? This ice cream, because it's about such a heavy topic. Whoa, ice melts. Whoa.
So this is Mero Witteman, and she worked together with Roderick van de Waal, professor of ice. I will not say it correctly. I apologize, Roderick. Professor, he knows a lot about how exactly the Antarctic will be melting in the next 1,000 years, and he's very worried about it, and he's been working on it for the last 30 years. And his biggest frustration is no one listens. I have been talking about it. They do not listen. They do not respond appropriately. I'm just going to keep, doing what I do, and hopefully one day someone listens. So together with Mero, they thought, well, how can we bring something as distant as the Antarctic, as nearby as the luxury of ice cream, right? If you imagine a warming world, the freezing of things becomes a luxury. And of course, talking about ice and ice cream is not the same as trying it. So I have here a cool box. And I have an amount of ice creams, which I'm not sure how many, but hopefully as many as you want to try. Is there anybody who's curious to try this? It's made with seawater that has been desalinated. It's fit for human consumption. And then sea salt has been added back to it in a very scientific process, because if you know, of course, salty water freezes at a lower temperature than normal water. But Merel turned her studio for the last month into a complete lab and has experimented with the right amount of salt that you can taste and can convince you of it, but will still freeze the water. So there are 6 flavors. I don't have a screen of those, but is there anyone curious to try it? All right. Do you want to help me hand them out?
Of course.
All right. I think if you just bring it around and let people pick one, and then we can compare flavors.
Yeah? Hands up. Are you afraid?
No, but curious, I guess.
Just curious. Okay. Yeah, here. I can actually use one. I have a sore throat, but I don't know if salt is good for that sore throat. Yeah, here.
I just had one. It's intriguing because it's sweet and salty, because it's also made with syrup, which is this brand of syrup.
You can share one. It's like, I'll let her try first. Yeah, you have to drink it. Yeah, that's part of the experiment. No, you wanna exchange? And also, yeah, thanks. This is also a melted one.
What does it taste like?
Here?
Salt.
Here?
Salt.
Anything else?
Some fruity flavor, I think. Like
You're lucky. There's just enough, I think. I'm so curious. There we go.
That says Doomsday
It says
Delight,
Doomsday.
so it's...
It's the Doomsday Delight flavor you got. Okay. Which one did you get?
Yeah.
Where is it?
It's so funny that we're talking about
Ice
climate change and all these
Ice
ice
Age.
creams melted.
All right.
It's not funny at all, but yeah.
Well, if you read carefully on the back, it does say, do not eat. Store at Antarctic temperatures. Warning, consumption contributes to sea level rise. Because what if we could freeze back all the ice that was melting from the Antarctic and make ice creams out of it? Would that make us care? Or should we actually look at our policies and make better agreements and better decisions?
You already had one. You've tried already. And? It's salty?
It is
Is it
salty.
just salty?
Try it. Try it.
Try it now.
Talking about it doesn't do it.
I have to hold my cards. I have to hold the ice cream. I don't think it's going to work.
Okay, I'll keep one for you for later.
Thank you. So let's go. So what is it like?
it's not very tasty.
Not very tasty.
Like climate change, that's also not tasty. I think.
Like climate change. Here?
Yeah, it
It's
brings a
definitely
message.
interesting.
It keeps on being interesting here on this side of the corner. Yeah. It's nice.
Hey,
yes.
what did you think of the ice cream?
I quite enjoy it.
It's
What is there to
Interesting.
enjoy about salty ice
Interesting.
cream?
What-
I think the flavor of this one is quite nice.
Tastes like
so,
electrolyte, so that should be healthy.
You
for
should
if
have
you've
taken
done
the
some
blue
sports.
one, people. You should have taken the blue one. The only one who is really enjoying this ice cream is the blue one. Take the blue pill. Here,
blue pill.
also some... Oh, here's another blue one. Are you also enjoying your blue ice cream?
Yeah, the first taste was nice, but then the aftertaste comes.
Yeah, a bit of a weird aftertaste. I understand. Yeah, actually, can I? Okay. Oh yeah, but I like weird stuff, so yeah, I like it.
Right. I've actually, I think,
One more project?
one kind of big thing to say about the project. We basically created this free space, this in-between space where nobody had to fulfill the role of scientist or fulfill the role of a designer. They could do whatever made sense to them. So Roderick, the scientist, and Merel, the communication designer, wanted to start an ice cream brand. Good for them, right? It place for experimentation, and they're both actually going to bring those ice creams and give lectures and tell the story of why it's important to bring this distant subject so close into your mouths. And hopefully talking about it, not just eating it. Of course, there are more projects, and I want to invite you all to Dutch Design Week 2024 in Eindhoven on Strijpes at our space. There will be an exhibition with an audio tour to tell you all about the collaborations. You will see the outcomes. You might meet some of the designers. You might get the chance to pick up a phone and call a climate scientist and ask any question. A little bit of a spoiler from the exhibition. There's also, if you sign up to our newsletter, you might get a link where you could pre-order the book that came out of the research about how we can collaborate better, more effectively, more sustainably between design and science. This is the 5th event, and I'm starting to look at Marcia, because all of these events have looked at a different question, and specifically the practices of different professions, and that interests me so much. How do people who specialize in making agreements make agreements? How do people specialize in writing about climate change choose their words? And we have had the luxury of actually hosting these events mostly to inspire us to think beyond our own professions and our own practices, because this is what climate change will ask of all of us. Whether we like it or not, the biggest certainty is that we will be collaborating in uncertainty. So we might as well start practicing. And that's what the project was about. That's what these events are for, to create space to talk about it.
And Cornelia, what if in 10 years you meet somebody and they say, oh yeah, I was part of that collaboration for future. But what do you hope that it would have been contributing to? What did it result in?
Oh, I hope that it inspired them to do something. I hope it inspired them to step out of a label anyone would have put on them and what their role is. I hope they took ownership of their responsibility, of their agency. You know, we had the, do you remember the talk with Ties?
Of course, Ties
when we
Joosten,
talked
yes.
about how do we talk about climate change. I still remember his exact words when he talked about why he does what he does. He said, I looked around and I thought, well, what is the biggest problem? We have climate change. Who does it depend on? A small group of highly educated people who like to read certain kinds of articles. And I will write for them. I will do my research for them because they're usually with understaffed teams. And when they are debating in the Tweede Kamer about those larger climate issues, as well as other issues of social justice, they need people like me who do the serious research and help them in their process. And I thought, how powerful is that? He's not trying out there in a boat in the sea trying to save the world. He is trying to do that one small thing, but to do it damn good. And I think if we all find that one thing we want to do and do it really well,
Yep.
maybe we will have more ice creams.
Maybe we'll have more ice creams. Thank you very much, Cornelia. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I think there's one speaker we have online, Robiou de Pont. And I think what she just mentioned that Joost actually does is also what this researcher does. You know, really putting the research into practice so that people that really need this research can really concretely use it for the things that we want, that they need. I want to do a little check-in with you because I truly believe as a moderator that these kinds of events, they are magical, right? We come here from a certain background, with a certain role, with a certain purpose. And then hopefully, at least that's my hope, that you leave this space and that you think, well, I can do something with that starting tomorrow in my own profession, in my own daily life, whatever. So let's find out if we truly are with a different group of people. Let's see, I already asked designers, are there some scientists in space? Please stand up. And I see, oh yeah, there, 1, 2. Please, stand up. They're like, I don't want to be a scientist, or what is it? Are you, please keep standing. So you're a scientist, what's your name?
Erlands.
Erlands, beautiful name, welcome. What brought you here?
That's a funny question because, well...
Ice cream?
Ice cream, maybe. No, I used to come before while I was doing the master with a friend, and we used to come to this type of talks. And then I thought, well, let's come back again. I think it would be fun. And I thought this topic would be quite interesting as well to maybe learn from other people and from these talks. So I thought, well, maybe.
What are you hoping to learn?
Well, at least what are they, how they tackle the climate change, in which ways they can make this, how it's called, this process of going through a better world. What are the steps to go through that? And as they say, how do they really make agreements on that? So I think more at the political level, maybe I was thinking on.
And then do you also, is it your topic, climate change as well?
Well, no, I'm in systems biology, which is sort of the systems that microbes create together, which you could distantly tie to climate change, but also to a lot of other things.
Well, anyway, climate change involves us all. Please stay up. I'm going. Okay, so there was. Yeah, please stay up. Are there maybe some policymakers in the audience? Designers? We already had them. Please stand up. So, what brought you here?
I work right now in Groningen at an institution that compensates the people who have damage caused by the earthquakes in Groningen. And so policy is really, what happens during the policy setting has a big impact on what we can design. So I was very curious to learn more about how is that from a policy state of mind, and how can we collaborate more between designers and policymakers to also have the human needs more integrated into policy and legislation.
Clear. Thank you very much. You're still sitting. Who are you? What are you doing here?
I was a policymaker.
You were.
Yeah, I
But you thought, no, it's boring. I'm going to stop that. Now, what do you do then now?
Oh, I'm looking for work, so I'm in between.
In between jobs. Well, please stand up. Are you looking for a job?
Yeah, in policy. No.
In policy? Yeah?
Yeah, sure.
What would be your dream job?
Working in the planning industry here or policy industry here would be great. Yeah.
Okay, so remember, what's your name?
Thomas
Thomas. Thomas who?
Cochrane.
Okay, Thomas Cochrane. Are there more people in between jobs? Yeah, this guy feeling awesome is actually in between jobs. So please stand up. So you feel awesome in between jobs. Are you truly in between jobs?
Well, I don't know what my next job is going to be because I'm in the process of defining what, but I know roughly the direction I want to go, and I want to do something in the direction of climate change.
And that's why you came here?
Yeah.
To find a new employer or to shape your future, your own?
I have the feeling that the job that I want doesn't exist, so I have to sort of create my own. Yeah.
We have a headhunter here, I think. No, okay. Please stand up. Who are you and why did you come here?
I'm Thoralf, and we are doing digital energy based on solar. So we are taking old solar panels, make them digital, and then we start to learn what happens if we start to get trust between parties again. So because energy was not a limitation, it was the management of the energy which limited us. And so if we have systems that we don't know each other, but if I borrow you energy, you borrow her, there, and we run this in the background with blockchain systems, then we are able to run a country like Netherlands without any cost of energy in a short period of time, let's say roughly till 2030. That's why I'm looking what's going on. I'm living in Amsterdam, and so here we are.
Thank you very much for coming. Okay, please keep standing, keep standing. So, who feels that they are indeed involved in climate change? Please stand up. I always wonder if somebody keeps. Oh, here you still have somebody sitting. So you you don't have the feeling that you have any involvement in climate change.
Involvement in not professionally. I'm not sure.
So not professionally.
But I do contribute to climate change. Yes.
Aren't we all doing that? Yeah. So, what brings you here, and what's your name?
My name is Yann van Dust. I'm a researcher at the Open Air Museum in Arnhem. And I'm here to learn about how to create conversations about this topic and to create the space to have an open conversation about it.
Thank you very much. Also stand up, because I think you are involved in climate change. Yes, we are all, aren't we? Climate change is all about us. We are contributing to it, whether in a positive or in a negative way. And that's why this topic is so interesting, because it's so incredibly hard to make agreements when there's so many stakeholders at the table. And today we have incredible speakers who know everything about this. And I'm really hoping that you know your role, whether it is professionally or whether it is in your personal lives. But please, close your eyes. Think about your role professionally, in daily life. Maybe you're a mother, like me, researcher, designer. What is your role? How could you contribute to this process of making agreements about climate change? What are you already doing? And how could you actually change that? Now keep your eyes closed. We will have two conversations. One will be almost like a college. This is how it works in practice. And then afterwards, we go a little bit deeper to fantasize about how we could actually change those processes. And then in the end, we will do a kind of design exercise. All of us will do a design exercise to come up with a design challenge so that designers or you, together in pairs, can contribute to that process of making agreements about climate change. So I hope you brought pen and paper, open your eyes. I hope you now have a clear view on who am I, why am I here, what are we doing here tonight? But truly, listen during those conversations and make a note whenever you feel, hey, this is actually about my work. This is also a problem that I face. This is my challenge. This is something I recognize. This resonates with me. So please really be active. Take your pen, take your paper, and write down whenever you feel this really, really, really involves me. Thank you very much for doing this with me. Sit down and enjoy. It's time for me to introduce the first speakers. We have one live one there at the screen. You see it there. Rob Weterings, Dieuwertje Wallaart, please come to the stage. Yes, warm welcome. And then also Yann Robiou du Pont. Yann, are you with us? Yes, you are. Where are you calling in from?
I'm in Norway at the moment.
You're in Norway. Oh, that's great. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, Rob Weterings, we've had a beautiful conversation about this topic.
Sure.
And you actually are a really experienced person here. So I thought it might be well to start with you. You're a program director of the National Climate Platform. In one sentence, what is the NCP?
NCP is a platform to connect people which aren't usually connected to climate policy. So we try to reach the people who are in poverty or just arrived and settled in the Netherlands, or well, working with other problems than climate, or people in early education to get their views, to get their perspective and perceptions on what is needed to strengthen climate change and their role in it. So we're connecting, basically.
And for how long are you around?
Around in this world?
Yeah.
65 years. So I'm a granddad, I'm a father.
Yeah.
And this is the last and most beautiful job in my career.
Could you take us on a day?
On a day?
In your profession?
Oh, gee. Many meetings. I won't talk about them. But basically, well, one day, let's take one day. We started last week on Tuesday, listening to some of the colleagues who were at Lowlands and at, how is it called, the other one? The Zwarte Cross, the Black Cross. Yeah. Sounds difficult, but it's just one major festival in the Netherlands. And we did some research together with the School of Journalism in Tilburg, what images and words people associate with climate change and what they don't want to see. So we're trying to learn about what is the actual dialogue, but what should be the way we talk about climate in order to reach people who scare away from Armageddon type of pictures. So that's how it started. Then we had an interesting journey, well, to a project. We're trying to visit as much as possible places in the Netherlands where small and medium enterprises or groups of people or farmers are working together to learn from them what we should bring to the next conversation. We had a nice conversation with the new Minister of Climate, Sophie Hermans, to strengthen our relation in order to get her working together with us in bringing the signals the opportunities and the problems we hear into policy. Basically, that's why we're there. We are there to listen what's happening in order to change policy, in order to take the chances that are there but not taken, and to take away the barriers which are there, which no one sees from a large distance.
It's funny, you know, program director and then, and I visit a festival. Everybody's
Sure,
like, oh,
yeah,
let's do that then in the future.
Schools and etc. Where things are happening, basically. You can sit in your office and wait till someone comes, but
you have to get out there.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And well, let's be serious. You actually worked on quite an interesting agreement, starting somewhere 2012, 2013.
Yeah, sure.
Energy agreement.
Yeah.
You have about 50 parties, bringing them all to the table. Can you please elaborate a little bit on how that process works? How do you do that?
Yeah, sure. I'll take a short step before, because these 45 people came together from a similar viewpoint, namely that the political parties weren't able to come together on a joint energy policy. It didn't. Some did, some didn't, and then it fell apart. So these 45 parties, organizations, like the large company organization VNO-NCW in the Netherlands, Friends of the Earth, were there. Labor organizations, scientists, government, they stick together because they saw if we wait for politics to change this policy, national policy, we will have to wait years. So they started to do it together, and basically it was hard work for 9 months. So coming to an agreement when you really want to take a step takes time, because you first of all have to get on speaking terms. You have different languages, different interests, different professions, so you have to learn each other in terms of to learn to get to know each other in terms of what do you want, what do you need, and where do you go to.
And how did you find out? How could we actually find that language that we need to actually start a conversation?
Well, start by changing the context. People are, especially in these organizations, are very used to getting in meetings and working the agenda. So you try to get them in different places, or give some person the chair who normally doesn't get the chair. We had very interesting chairs who turned out to be very effective, because no one expected they would be. So you try to change roles.
Can you give an example?
Yeah, sure. Joris Thijssen, probably known as one of the members in Parliament, was very effective in the energy agreement in getting industry and other organizations together in energy efficiency. At least in the first part, in thinking about what could we do.
And what did he do?
Well, what he did was first ask what everybody saw as a problem. So that's basically the first step. What do you see as a problem? Which is always a variety of things, and then invited everybody to look for solutions for each other's problems. And basically that's where it stands. That's what my experience is also. People share values, but if you don't find the common ground, you can talk endlessly and end nowhere.
And what gave him the space to do that? Because you know, with these kinds of conversations, you always have people who are not that active or not really showing, you know, what their values are.
Yeah, sure. Basically, in such a project, you need time, you need some authority. So the one who put Joris in that position was someone with authority in the world of big companies. He said trust in Joris.
So you put him in that place.
Yeah, sure.
You gave him that stage.
Yeah, sure, because he wouldn't be accepted otherwise. So basically, what you do in trying to get people together in another conversation than just colliding in different interests is change the setting.
And how does, I mean, you were just talking about 10 months was shaping how are we actually going to have this conversation, finding the right language, finding everybody a position that they are comfortable with, feel safe to share their value, to share their ideas.
That were the first 3 months.
3 months.
Yeah, sure.
But 3 months is already a long time.
Yeah,
people get impatient. Probably they want to talk about the content.
Sure.
How do you?
Well, during these 3 months, something grows, and that's commitment. So people tend not wanting to leave the room. And that's what you need for the next step, going into deeper, trying to take the next step, to invite each other to get the next step, to talk with each other from knowing what the other is doing and struggling with. And the last, I think, 2 or 3 months were staying up late, talking long nights about the real difficult issues. But 80% of the issues were solved in the first 5 months, I think.
Okay. And when did it ever heat up that you thought, oh, now we're losing parts? Because you, of course, your goal is that all of them actually sign the agreement, right?
No, it's not about the amount of signers.
Yeah.
It's about the impact you expect it will have. A good agreement can be executed. Then you need as much as signers as you need.
Yeah.
But a good agreement is also something which will be executed.
Okay.
So what you need is commitment. And there always are, and that was in the climate agreement 5 years later also the case, there always are groups which are there to influence the debate, but not necessarily to commit to the execution. And that can be okay if they influence the debate in a powerful way which helps to come to impact.
And then when somebody leaves the table, what do you try to get them? How does that work?
Basically, it's about values. So if you know the person, you know that it's also a big step to leave the table. And maybe you can say something about the climate agreement. Sure.
I believe you recognize some things in your work as a chair for the Jonge Klimaatbeweging, right? And we were talking about. I was talking to Rob before I spoke to you, and he was talking about. Well, it's actually like a marriage. You have to continue to talk, and you have to try to get out of it together. But if a marriage fails, you divorce.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I was talking to Dieuwertje, and she was like, "Oh, he didn't sign actually that agreement." Yeah. Do you remember that, Rob?
Yeah, it did. It did hurt.
It did hurt.
Absolutely. But I also want to state that being there, especially representing the youth, in itself was an enormous value, and it did influence the discussion.
Yeah, well, Dieuwertje, the Jonge Klimaatbeweging, you are actually giving a voice to the youth who actually have a voice of their own future. And what is your role as a chair?
So I'm the chair of the organization, which means I try to take everything outside, basically. So we have a really big organization with volunteers and young people who work together to create the sound, and I am kind of the voice and the face of that sound for this year. But also I try to coordinate everything and make sure everyone does their jobs.
He was just describing his day. Is it similar or?
Yeah, it's there's also a lot of meetings, so I recognize that.
Who recognize that as well? A lot of meetings in their jobs.
I think a lot of jobs within climate are about talking. There's a lot of talking happening. So. And
do I sense a little bit of a frustration there? Or?
No, I know what I signed up for. So, but sometimes.
Did you really?
Yeah. I very consciously chose to be a part of my organization, which is really focused on the talking part of climate. We were once raised up to be that voice within the climate agreements, actually, that Rob worked on, to represent young people within, as like a talking partner. So, it's my work. And I really believe in that work as well, so...
How come you believe in it? What motivates you to do it every day?
I think it's... me and Rob, we were kind of talking about this. 7 years ago, we are existing for almost 8 years. November, it's been 8 years. And 8 years ago, we would never get a chair at the table. We would have to beg Rob to be included in those conversations. And now, one of the first questions that is asked in a lot of policy trajectories, one of the first questions is, are the youth involved? That we get young people to talk on this. So, that is progress, I believe.
Okay, nice. So you experienced actually the impact of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Okay, Rob, they were at the table at a certain moment,
Yeah.
and then they left, but now they are still being invited. Why didn't you sign actually that agreement?
Yeah, so this was actually before my time, so I wasn't the one who made that decision.
You have an idea, probably.
I know why. They didn't agree with the agreement, so they didn't think the ambitions were high enough. They thought there was too much leniency with a lot of more industrial parties. So I believe especially as young people within the climate movement, we have a responsibility to be ambitious and keep that ambition high. And when the ambition isn't high enough, we walk away. Yeah.
Hey, and you also go to some nice festivals. Last year you went to the COP in Dubai, right?
Yeah, I called it a circus this afternoon. I think
circus.
that's a better term.
Yeah. How do you experience that?
Crazy. It was like a roller coaster for me.
Because this is all about agreements. Right?
Yeah,
This is high level agreement.
I think this is the most agreement that there is. But it's crazy. We talked a little bit about language here, that in order to make agreements, you have to have a common language. They heard that at the COP and they created a whole language of their own. And it's really difficult to understand. So when you want to go to the COP, the first thing you have to do is learn the language.
What is it? Vocabulary? Is it tempo? Is it what is
No,
it?
it's mainly vocabulary. And also a lot of words are really empty. And they are really good.
Can you give an example?
Well, that's more like greenwashing. It's not empty. It's actually more of a hoax, which is not empty. But
what did you hear that you thought, we're not talking about anything actually here?
There are so many, a lot of it sounds like almost AI generated. Like there's, it's really like they're talking about commitment and.
Hope just also mentioned the word commitment.
Yeah, I mean, commitment is great, but there's they're talking about being committed to the resolution of the conversation which was held in the bilateral, and there's just so much empty stuff, and you need to kind of teach yourself that language in order to be part of that conversation. But also, I really learned there that you also have to be able to pull out of that and keep in mind that is not a real language, and these are only used to it's also kind of used to complicate everything so people don't understand what's happening. And I also really started considering it my job in order to translate it back. So I teach myself the language, try to be part of the conversation, but also sometimes intervene in that and just say, what are we talking about here? This is not what it's about. And also bringing it back to other young people and talking about, this is what's really happening there. It sounds really complicated, but it isn't always.
But this was the first time that you attended this.
Yeah.
Did you really feel from the beginning, I'm part of this conversation, I'm really making a difference in what kind of agreements will actually be put to paper?
Well, when you go to COP, you think you're going to change the world, and then you are there for 2 days, and then you realize, I actually mean nothing at all. So that's also part of that roller coaster.
And how did you come back to feeling hopeful? Actually, I can do something. I can mean something here.
Yeah, I started to look for things that did make me feel positive and did teach me stuff, and also. I started to focus on just smaller goals, but also realizing that's where the real impact lies. So at first you think you're gonna influence all the main delegations and you're gonna change the entire final text, but then I realized that's not where my impact is going to be. It's going to be more in informing youth about what's happening here, having those conversations at home with my friends, with my family, and making that impact in your own circle of influence.
Yeah. Well, Rob, here we have Dieuwertje, who is young, fresh, with the energy to move forward because there's my future at stake. But I can also imagine you are there, sitting there with people who actually feel quite confident confident that, you know, with all these hoax words, you know, these passwords. How do you feel about that? When people actually are zooming out and not really...
Well, you start asking nasty questions. Okay. Because if you feel, and I know the feeling, that someone is talking around... Nothing. Yeah. Then you start asking questions. That's why you need scientists who give you the information to ask the questions that matter, and you need people who are able to come in such a process as to go back to what's basically driving this behavior. So there's a lot of things basically, and that's why I use commitment, not lightly, and why we're talking about marriages. It's beyond this bubble talk. So you need to go beyond. And if organizations stay in that position, they shouldn't sign. They should leave. And basically, what I have seen happening in the energy agreement, but also in the climate agreement, is that not only the ones who like me help and prepare these processes, but also the parties involved are fed up with all this behavior talking around the bush, and they say, well, do you want to sign or do you want to take a step or don't you? Yep. So basically it's, and that's one of the things I want to stress, making an agreement is one thing, but basically it's not the agreement which counts, it's the action which follows.
Yes.
So and
actually not signing also means something in
sure.
the future, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
You're stepping aside a process which you know will be happening. Yeah. So you have to install mechanisms to follow what's happening actually. Yeah. And I enjoyed 4 or 5 years of monitoring the energy agreement, and keep on asking the nasty questions. Why didn't that happen? Things always go otherwise than you thought.
It's also a lot of years, things change.
Yeah, but you have to go back. Why did we do that? Okay. What did we want to reach? And are there other ways to come to the same effect?
Well, you already mentioned that scientists are very important. Sure. Because especially when it comes to climate change, you have to base it on something. You have to measure it. Yann is very patiently sitting there and listening. Yann, you are actually working on the scientific assessment of fair and ambitious climate targets. Please explain to us, what does that mean? What do you do?
Thank you. I could relate a lot to what has been said before in the discovery of COPs as well. So the Paris Agreement basically defines a collective goal, so for the world to achieve. And compared to previous agreements under the UN, climate agreements, it chose to agree on the collective goals, on what the world should do, and leave open to negotiations how much everyone should pitch in order for the world to get there. And so there's no specific target for each country or specific amount of finance that each country should provide, and that's up for negotiations afterwards. One of the elements that should guide the cooperation is the Article 2 of the Paris Agreement on equity. And so it says that the implementation of the Paris Agreement should be equitable and that it should reflect certain principles, including responsibility and capability. So basically meaning how much each country already contributed to climate change, sort of a polluter-payer principle, and how capable it is to address it, so how rich it is, basically. So what I do is to try to interpret those principles of equity to suggest how much each country should reduce its emissions. So to abide the law and ultimately abide the physical limits of the natural environment in order to stay below 1.5 degrees as the Paris Agreement requires. So the goal is to advise decision makers on the possible agreements that they can do or the targets, but also ultimately to inform the different actors. It can be economic actors that also want to align with those collective goals, or the courts of law if civil society, including youth organizations, decide to sue their governments for inaction, even as they sign the Paris Agreement.
Thank you. Thank you for that clear explanation. Actually, it's also very interesting to go and visit his website, because it's very clear, actually, you know, what he's working on as the main, you know, the main sentence, the main question, and then who are the actors actually, you know, involved there, and what kind of impact are you actually making with the research that you are doing. Now, I imagine a scientist doing research, and then you have this paper, and then you have this communication system that brings out the paper online or in whatever newspaper you want to find it. Is that also the process you are in? Does your work result into a paper or something?
Yes. So my work has to, because it's my position, but mostly science in the climate agreement has a special role. And when I say special, I do it in a comparison to other fora that I don't know specifically, but I think science has a much bigger role in climate agreements than it has in, say, commercial agreements, for instance. So I don't hear that commercial agreements before the WTO, you have countries coming up with a study saying it's bad for people or it should be fair or so on and so on. The climate agreement at least pretends to be science-based and says that you should refer to the best available science. So then when you come with a scientifically reviewed paper, and especially a summary of the science, such as what the IPCC provides, it has a special weight at the negotiations and also before courts. And that's particularly useful for actors that don't otherwise have enough power, usually meaning economic power. So small island developing states, for instance, they have a representation, but they don't have a lot of negotiating power based on their economy. So they might say, well, look, here is what science says. And the issue is that a lot of scientists like me are taught and working in and for the North. So it's also a question of how science and knowledge is recognized, also knowledge that comes from other countries and other people, but also what is the role, how do you acknowledge it, how do you bring it in the agreements. I personally try to rely on the scientific study as, you know, a peer-reviewed study to then give it a certain power for the negotiations. And so then, yeah, the status of it matters, the content matters, the language matters too.
Yeah, and you also choose to actually I think take an extra step, you know, run the extra mile by creating tools that the right people can use to actually show that certain countries, certain cities, whatever, certain communities or companies are actually really contributing to climate change, right? Is that something that you choose to do yourself, or is that part of your assignment? How does that work?
No, so that's not like, as an academic employed by an institution, I think your career, it depends on the institution, but basically you're supposed to publish papers. Other things can be well regarded, but I think especially in climate science, there's a lot of people coming in this field because they are interested, they're curious, and they also want to have an impact. So I think that was the driver for me, and I didn't want to simply do studies that, you know, tell what the world should be in theory. So that's why I made those tools, to see how it can interest people, how they use it. And I was surprised that some lawyers are using it for court cases, because it's confidential in the document. So I didn't initially know of it. And so somebody earlier talked about how they want to do a job that may not exist yet. That was the case for me. And now I work a lot on advising court cases, because there was this iconic court case also in the Netherlands, Urgenda. And so now more and more it becomes a field of research itself as to, you know, what is the science that matches both the planetary limits, but also the legal agreements to inform court cases. So long story short, it was to interact with the people who use the science, also to make it useful quicker, given the urgency of the situation.
Yeah, I have one question about that court actually that you got a huge impact on. I know that there are some people in the audience that are really interested in human rights, climate justice. You already addressed it. Could you maybe give an example on the impact that you made with your research on human rights?
So that's collective work, so I couldn't really say what my impact is, but basically there were several. There's a negotiating one, which is trying to give a voice to developing countries, and so one of the studies we did was to try to really just reflect the principles of the Paris Agreement and really questions all the assumptions we do, and we could highlight that a lot of them implicitly benefit rich countries. So that was important, and that's a piece of work that they use also in the discussion of human rights applications. So that's one avenue. The other one was the recent court cases before the European Courts of Human Rights, called the Klimascenarionen case, on behalf of Switzerlanders, and there was another case that also helped on behalf of the Portuguese youth. And here, what was shown is that even as Switzerland had a net zero target for 2050 and an emissions reduction target for 2030, it didn't play by the book of the Paris Agreement. It did not explain how its contribution to global warming, but also to addressing global warming, was sufficient. How was it a fair share of the global efforts needed to limit global warming to 1.5? And that's in the Paris Agreement. That's already something countries should be doing. But I think the language they used was not very convincing, as was said before, and not only to the youth, but also to courts. And so the contributions we made was to basically check the arguments that Switzerland brought, saying, oh yeah, we use this methods, and this is why it's fair, or this is why it works. And we checked it, and it didn't.
Okay, thank you very much. Wait, do you recognize that you actually?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, well,
sure. But basically, what I referred to was similar when you have scientists independently monitoring what is agreed upon and what is the effect in execution, and if it doesn't fit, someone has to say stop. And there's independence and knowledge key in it, and additional to that, you have to have the authority to make science play this role. So it's interesting who puts the scientists in the position that they are granted the authority to say stop. That's important. We tend to live in a society in which science is another opinion, and then it's not in that position.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine there's some designers in the audience who also feel that they are almost always involved in a process in a very late stage. And I can also imagine that it would be nice to invite scientists already in an early stage at the beginning, so that they know, hey, I'm working on this research, and maybe I could, direct it in that way. Do you already do that?
Yeah, sure. It started with the energy agreement. We invited scientists in the secretary which I was heading, and it continued in the climate agreement. And for designers, there's also a role in the starting phase when I said we need to look for common ground, and we have to talk about values we share or we don't share. Then basically you need to make that as clear and visible or tested as possible. So
why is that important? Dieuwertje, maybe you have an idea? Why is it important that it becomes tangible, what's being said there?
Because when it's tangible, like I said before, a lot of the work we do is talking, but talking doesn't really translate to action. So when you make it tangible, I think that's the first step to translating it to, what it's really about, to actually doing something about it.
And you had a taste of it now, right? You've been working as a chair, but in your opinion, if you could change something tomorrow in this whole process of making agreements about climate change, what would you change?
Get more young people at the table, probably. It's an easy answer, but also because I think when it comes to young people, we tend to be able to put our differences aside a little bit more easily, because we have a more...
What do you mean with that?
I feel like with people who are, especially when it comes to negotiations and agreements and stuff, there's a lot of people who are there fighting for their own their own interests. And young people tend to kind of fight for a more common interest, in my experience.
Oh, you hear that? You agree?
No. but on the first part of the answer, yes. Of course, we need young people, and I would like to add, if I could change now something, we really have to develop in the groups which are involved, young people, but also other groups within society, because basically climate change touches everybody's life, but in different ways. And I experienced that when you have a small group, you can make big steps, but the consequences of your actions are on a much larger group. Basically you have to develop ways, and maybe designers can help there too, to make communication about what you're talking about, the agreement you're drafting, what consequences that may have for those people not at the table. Not only young people, but also poor people or other countries. Or it's really hard to imagine, especially when you're in a bubble talking about the agreement. You have to continuously
stay open.
Stay open.
And and try to really know what's going on for other people.
Sure.
Yeah. And Yann, what if Rob invites you as a researcher? What would you hope to contribute to his job in making agreements on these important issues?
That's something I was going to reflect on, is that not everything is, of course, happening or supposed to happen at the Paris agreement or at the UN. And I think part of the disappointment we get from there is the expectations, and a lot has to happen at all levels. And so through the job of Rob and national agreement and courts of laws and really transforming things, the international agreements are more principles and directions, and of course that are also influenced by tons of other considerations that countries have. I think I very much agree with what he mentioned. I think the governance structure within countries, and I think especially for ours, which are democratic countries that work by the rule of law, we need to have check and balances. It doesn't mean that scientists should make the law or should decide what happens, but there needs to be independent assessment. There needs to be a process as to how decision makers are responding to this assessment, and there needs to be people also deciding on what assessments need to happen, and that needs to also include young people. And the last thing is also, science doesn't mean numbers. Science means, to me, it means it's a method, it's a peer review process, it's the independence. And so that includes social science. And I think that's not what I do, but I think this is very important, and that's even more treated as a political opinion rather than an actual knowledge. And it needs to be much better recognized also in decision-making processes.
Thank you very much. A big round of applause for our three first speakers. Rob, Dieuwertje, Yann, thank you. Of course, they are staying around. They will sit in the audience. Of course, please feel free to join the conversation we're having next. We've been listening to this process, and my next speakers actually also know all about these processes. So I'm hoping that they also have an idea of how we actually can do that differently, and then what we could change tomorrow. Nina de Pater, Jantijn Anema, and Mert Kumru. Yeah, Nina, we just had somebody here who was involved in a quite known process.
Yeah.
Energy agreement, climate agreement. You're actually project leader of something we also all know, the case Mileudefensie against Shell, right? What's the current status?
We're waiting for the outcome of the appeal.
so on the 12th of November, the Court of Appeal will give its verdict.
And what does that mean? What does that mean for the process to come?
Yeah, so maybe for those who don't know, in 2021, we won a big court case against Shell. And the judge in The Hague ruled that Shell needs to reduce its CO2 emissions by 45% in 2030. It was a very unique and historic case. It was the first time that a company was held accountable for its climate inaction and was held responsible for the CO2 emissions.
Who in the audience followed this process, this case? Yeah, I'm going here. How did you feel when you found out they won?
Yeah, no, I think it's amazing. I work in the law department at the UvA, so we're very familiar with the Urgenda first and then Mileudefensie Shell. So it was quite astounding for those who aren't in law. Like, there's almost never, or in fact, the principle is that companies can't be held responsible for those actions. Yeah. So to have something like that would set a precedent was really, super exciting.
Wait, did you celebrate?
Oh, of course.
Great. And you, Nina, did you celebrate?
I did, although it was quite a shame that I was not able to celebrate that much on the day itself because I had to do all the press work and all the other things that happened after. It was quite overwhelming, actually. So I was able to celebrate a couple of days later.
Yeah, so you're the project leader. Yeah. What does that mean to be a project leader in something so big?
Yeah, it's always funny to call something a project when it takes years. So, yeah, where does it start? Where does it end? I have no idea. Probably it won't end after the 21st of November, although we really believe that we will be able to win again. There are steps that can be taken after that by Shell or by us. What I do, so basically I am kind of in the middle in between the research part, the legal part, so where our researchers and our lawyers work together to build the case, to argue in front of the judges, and the public opinion side. So we are an organization that we don't just want to do court cases because we really believe that change is necessary and change is not only reached by doing court cases. It also
it's a tool.
It's one of the tools that we have. So we really need the public debate. We really need all of you to steer this debate and to somehow all together we will be able to change the system, and we can contribute to that. But this court case also shows where we have where the problems are. The arguments that are being made show how the current state is dysfunctional, the current situation. So I kind of try to translate what is happening in court and what researchers are doing, researchers like Yann, that the knowledge that is used in court. I try to translate that to a bigger audience, and that can be in this kind of places, it can be on social media, but it can also be for specific audiences that we target, for example, policymakers.
Okay, so I imagine you in a field, many puppets around you, they're talking there, there's shit going on there, and there's a massive group and trend or something going on there. And then you have to bring those pieces together to create a kind of story, to put it out there, that everybody can use to move forward in the direction you would love to go.
Yeah.
And now, November 12th, you said?
Mm-hmm.
What would be the best outcome?
Well, the best outcome, of course, is if this appeal judge says Mileudefensie is right. Shell needs to change right now and drastically reduce its emissions. And I believe it is possible. We made all the arguments. I think we've done everything we could during the oral hearings. We wrote everything down in all of the written pieces. So now there's nothing more we can do except for waiting and preparing for the outcome.
Is that the last stage?
No, so there's one more appeal. So in Dutch it's called cassation. So it's the highest court.
Yeah, the Hoge Raad.
The Hoge Raad. Yeah.
Do you think you get there?
Well, the CEO of Shell already announced that he will go there. So very interesting. It might show that they are not so sure about. I'm not sure, but a couple of weeks ago there was an interview done with the CEO of Shell, and he told the journalist that they will go to the highest court. Yeah, so it will probably happen.
Yeah. So how long could that still take?
Yeah. Between 1 year and 4 years. Yeah. So another reason why court cases are not the answer, because it takes many years. Maybe an interesting thing for the designers, because it takes a lot of time to do a court case, and
the field changes as well.
It
right,
changes.
in those years?
Yeah, it changes. I think one of the things that was very interesting to see was when we started, there was the Paris Agreement. A very important part of this court case, because it really helps our argumentation. It really shows that we all agree on that there's this limit of 1.5 degrees. So Shell cannot really... they also have to agree to that because the whole world agrees. But there's a lot of difference in opinions on who is responsible to reduce these CO2 emissions. And of course Shell says, we are not responsible, you are responsible as consumer, as government.
There's a very eager hand from the public, from the man who doesn't know what he wants to do for work.
Yeah, of course. No, that's okay. I'm sorry I didn't notice you. I'm very sorry.
My question was if I thought Shell has withdrawn itself from all agreements of emission reductions. Mr. Sawan, who is the CEO,
Yeah.
He was confronted by Matt van Baal from Follow This, together with Arjuna Capital, who got 20% of the shareholders together to force them on the climate abatement path for Paris.
Yeah.
But they have withdrawn themselves, is my understanding. Is that correct?
I think it depends how you interpret his words.
Right.
Because, speaking of empty words, they still say that they are committed to the Paris Agreement. But when you look at the actions, it clearly shows that they are not committed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So talking about this, you come all this work, all your hard work as a team. I mean,
yeah, of course.
And then you come to agreement, and then in reality, things go quite differently.
Yeah.
In that process, how could we change that? Do we need to make space for the outcome, or what do you think about that?
I think one of the big issues that we have in right now is that these agreements, especially those on UN level, are made between countries. And then when it comes to how to implement those and how to involve non-state actors, so as they call them, so companies, for example, how they are involved is up to every individual country. And that makes it possible for multinational companies such as Shell to navigate through this world of countries that all have their own contribution. So when laws are getting too difficult for a country like Shell, they can operate somewhere else. And that's one of the big issues that we face right now. It's called the governance gap. And we thought, can we tackle this, and is there a way to still hold Shell accountable and force them to act differently without having the state involved? So that's how we ended up in court, because judges can rule and they can and they have a different that's a different system than when you talk to policymakers.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if this really answers your question.
No, it does. In a way, it really does. But I see Jantijn sitting there recognizing many things.
Okay.
How did you actually use what they do their job, right?
Yeah.
What do you do? You write books, you work for Urgenda, but you follow this case, of course.
Yes, of course.
Do you use that in your work?
Well, not directly. I think we, of course, applaud it and following it with much interest. But we do not apply it directly. I can tell something about something we did that involves design and is actually another way to pursue change without making agreements, or at least not directly. So, for example, we developed over the last couple of months together with, and we, maybe I should clarify that, we is Urgenda, which is an NGO, doing several very different projects, all aiming to fasten the transition. And the last couple of months I have been working on, together with some colleagues and some architects from Rotterdam, to develop a alternative vision for the space that is currently occupied by the airport of Rotterdam, The Hague. So our plan by that was, well, what if we just envision another future first, and then we can start with that vision, the talkings about it, and the talkings about maybe another future for that specific area. And of course, this is limited in scope, such a project, but it is important, right? So that's what we did, and we asked some professionals in economics to make all the calculations and make the, it's called an MKBA in the Netherlands. I don't know how it translates in English, but it is like an economic analysis of several alternatives. So that's what we did. And I think projects like that, together with law cases and the negotiation and all the talking that is needed, are quite important, because that actually provides people with, it's at least an opportunity to believe that there's actually another future possible. And I think that's very important. And one funny example of that is, I think in 1939, if it's correct, General Motors, which is of course a very big car company designing cars, presented at the Wereldtentoonstelling. World Expo, it's where we got the Eiffel Tower from. They designed this enormous landscape of skyscrapers and very broad roads. So what they actually did is they just designed the circumstances for the product that they have designed to flourish. And well, in this case, it turned out that it became the future, right? I mean, lots of places started to look like that. And I think that this is something, especially when it comes to design, that we should discussing and should stress and should be doing way more, because this actually contributes so much to the belief in people that it is actually possible to achieve great results in the field of climate change. And without people actually believing this, I don't think it will happen. So this is something, just one project that I've been working on recently. Yeah.
Can we have a big round of applause for Jantijn? Addressing the importance of design. You're very eager to get to the design exercise, I feel. That's really nice. Let's go back to court again a little bit, because Mert, I see you sitting there, and I think it must resonate with you that he was talking about designing the circumstances, because that, in a way, is what you are doing, right? Could you explain what you do, what your function is, and why?
Yeah, so my name is Mert Kumru. I'm part of the World's Youth for Climate Justice. Just to do a round of checking, has anyone heard of the ICJ advisory opinion on climate change and human rights? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's terrible, because this is the most important case ever brought forward at the highest court in the world. That's the International Court of Justice, and we are the organization that brought that at the International Court of Justice. And we're basically, just to give you an overview, we're doing Urgenda. Time is 196 for all UN member states at the same time. Just a casual Tuesday,
making it a challenge.
And to give you an overview, this process has started actually 5 years ago in the Pacific. My colleagues from the University of the South Pacific created the Pacific Island Students Fighting Climate Change, and from that we were created as a global campaign to explain the consequences of the climate crisis and to basically create a narrative in which we trying to make it more known that the climate crisis is a human rights crisis. Basically arguing that as soon as a flood happens, for example, your right to education is hampered. Your right to sustainable housing is being affected. All of these rights are directly the consequence of a climate crisis, thus enabling a human rights crisis. And it is interesting because at the ICJ, all states recognize the ICJ. Some do not recognize it. Well, I mean, officially they do, but on paper they don't. And de facto they don't, I must say. However, this court has never spoken before about climate change in its entire history. It's some 80 or odd years old almost, and never before. So we said, you know what? This is the final tool we have in our basket of peaceful forms of working within the system. Fuck it, let's use it. And we tried to get this advisory opinion, but you can only get it as a state, or state can request it, and you need to have a majority of votes from the General Assembly. We went to Vanuatu, a small island state that is already going to suffer within this current generation because of climate change. They said, we support this, we're going to bring this forward at the General Assembly. Last year, in March, we had a historic moment again, because for the first time ever, unanimously, there was support for our advisory opinion request with no votes against, no states. This is a fact I want to point out. We have lobbied for 3 years, 2 years with the Dutch government, and there are some ministers I have really fought with in conversations. And on the last freaking day, when they saw that the entire European Union was voting in favor, and even Poland was voting in favor, then the Dutch government said, okay, we are going to vote as well on the last day, the last hours. And this was all because they were afraid of Urgenda, but then bigger and worse.
But is it also because you are pushing forward this case?
If they were afraid of me, I mean...
No, not you,
okay.
but as a group.
They probably were.
I mean, does that then feel like a big responsibility as a country? Because you're from this country?
Well, we told them... I literally told them, be my guest, do not vote in favor if you don't want to, but we'll see you in court anyways. So, because the implications of the advisory opinion are universal, and often people refer to the Paris Agreement as it's a non-binding document, or advisory opinions are non-binding. This is technically, and I'm a lawyer, so allow me, it's not true. They are binding. The Paris Agreement is a binding document. The way in which we need to achieve the Paris Agreement, that's not determined. And that's what we're trying to ask the court, to determine what the obligations are of states. So our request is asking the court, okay, we have the agreement, we have the goal, amazing, beautiful, it's almost 10 years ago, but okay. Now we want to determine how to get to the solution that we've put out, or the answer that we've put out in the Paris Agreement. And that's what our case is about.
And then how?
So, for example, asking...
We're waiting for the answer.
No, well, the answer is going to be given we hope within a year. On December 2nd, all of the countries of the world will come to The Hague to orally submit their submissions at the judges, and then they will have a 6-7 month period, I don't know, to review and to give their opinion. And that opinion will be a document which states then what the consequences are for not only states, but also for companies. And there's actually a precedent, because the ITLOS Tribunal, the Tribunal on the Law of the Sea, recently gave their advisory opinion on climate change. That was also asked by specific states, and Caribbean states, I must say. And they said, and this is very interesting for Nina as well, that state actors, non-state actors like companies, also fall within the same scope when it comes to mitigating climate change. So a Shell is also then affected by such a ruling, and therefore it doesn't matter if you're a non-state actor or if you're a government, you're both falling within the same regime, which is governed by international law.
Yeah, and then that means there will be affected human rights.
Correct, yes, and that's the most important final threshold that we haven't passed in international law, because in international law there is no existence knowledge of our rights being affected by climate change. That is not a given thing right now. And that's what we're trying to establish, so that we, with this advisory opinion, can go to every single national court that exists to say, listen, the highest court your country recognizes has said this about human rights. You cannot ignore a higher ruling than the court that you already recognize.
Okay. Well, Jantijn, right? So December 2nd?
December 2nd, yeah, just a couple of days before Sinterklaas, we will be seeing countries from all over the world coming to The Hague and it will be like a 2-week process. And then 7 more months, hopefully before the summer break, we will have this opinion, maybe probably after. And then with that opinion, the suing starts. So, yeah.
Oh, great. Well, how can we follow this?
World's Youth for Climate Justice, WYCJ on Instagram. Well, I feel like an influencer now.
You are. You should be.
I should have brought my bottle, yeah. It's in the back.
Is kind of like an influencer, right? but Jantijn, you're sitting in between people who are going to court also about storytelling, campaigning. Now, this would be a great issue you could also use in your work, doesn't it? If this outcome is, yes, indeed, climate justice, human rights involved, let's take it on. What could you use?
Oh, yes, that would be huge, of course.
Yeah.
Well, what can you use? It's quite a hard question for me to answer because we have multiple very different projects, and not everyone is like, you wouldn't notice immediately what the influence is.
I feel like it's also like a synergy, right? For example, we've learned a lot from Urgenda. We've learned a lot from Mileudefensie.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's trying to get us to a point in which we all combine our efforts. And it's not mutually exclusive. I feel like it's very much so, which also brings me to a point in the previous panel. I felt a bit of annoyance from my side because in the past couple of years, we have been so often we've heard from, pardon my language, the older generations that we need to wait for our turn, and if we didn't agree on this, then there will be nothing. So, but you better agree with what we have, or you don't agree with nothing, and that's not inclusive whatsoever. I mean, if we're not at the table, we're on the menu, and if you're forcing us to be at the table, we're not going to enjoy our time. So why would we even be there? And I feel like that's why we created our own narrative, like you said before, and said, well, we're going to use your system against you to show you how it should be. And that's why, for example, we're trying to force countries as well to include young people at their submissions and the perspectives of indigenous people, for example, too. Because with all due respect, again, they will live the longest with the consequence of the climate crisis and not those that are currently in power.
Yeah, but we were listening to Rob and Dieuwertje that actually something did change there. What's next? What should change more?
Well, for one, talking about agreements, there's one story that I always find quite inspiring, and it's from the architect of the Paris Agreement, Christiana Figueres. And so the thing that she says is, well, the single most important thing in getting this done in Paris, and before the negotiations started, people were quite pessimistic about it. They had like a hopeless COP in Copenhagen, I think, and this, nobody really thought it would happen. And even herself at her first press conference as a leader of the negotiations, she got a question, well, do you think it will happen? And she said, well, no, I don't think so, because that was the broad felt sentiment. And then she realized that when you look at it that way, you will probably not fix it, and there won't be an agreement. So she started focusing first on herself in changing her attitude and her mindset in getting to really think and believe in a positive outcome, and then get others to do that well, to really listen to others. And I think that is something that we can still learn quite a bit. That's still an important lesson today. I think even among people who are working professionally in climate, there is not always the right vibe, to use a popular term.
Well, this resonates a lot with me.
Because people, especially in the current political situation, people tend to be pretty negative towards a positive outcome sometimes. It's quite hard to find like true optimists, and I admit that is very hard, but at the same time, it is of the utmost importance that we will manage to fix our attitude about it, just like Christiana Figueres did.
Rob, with your experience, all these negotiations. This must happen a lot. That people, have this attitude of it's not going to happen. It's no positive. It's not working. Poldermodel. What do you do if you feel that's going on? Negative mentality.
It's not an option.
It's not an option.
No, it's not an option. So
what do you do?
If you can't do anything, what can you do? That's that's the part of the nasty questions. That's the part of the court cases. No, it's not an option. So what we do is put people in rooms and come out when there's an option, basically.
Okay.
One thing that I think this really makes a lot of sense, and it also shows that we need people who say yes. And I think all of us are an example of that. When we started the court case against Shell, no one believed in it. Everyone said, you're crazy, you're going after the biggest company of the Netherlands. You will never be able to win. Well, we showed them different. But we also needed a lot of stamina, because it takes years. And Mert also shows, he just told us that it took him 3 years lobbying, and it can be extremely frustrating. But as long as there are some people who feel that they can achieve this, even though it takes 3 years. Young people who are lobbying for 3 years, I think, also with me, people sometimes ask me, how long have you been working on this case? And then I'm surprised myself. But it is kind of a stamina. You need to go on because we believe that it is possible. And I think that's something that everyone here sometimes might feel hopeless or alone, and then it can really help to think about those small moments when you did feel the power and hold on to those, because they will come back maybe tomorrow, maybe in a year, but there's always this momentum, and sometimes you have to wait for it, and sometimes you can create it yourself.
Yeah, so I imagine this process being long, all kinds of challenges, getting frustrated, feeling lonely, losing hope. Can you, my speakers, and I'm also looking at you, I don't know if Yann is still there. Please share with us a moment. Yann is not there anymore. So these 5, please. Share with us a moment that you felt hope again.
Can I just jump in on this? Because if I'm very honest, we do not feel very hopeless or negative whatsoever with the climate crisis, and I will tell you why. I want to show you my bottle because I had it before. On our bottle, we actually have a quote, well, not a quote, but the term used by Christiana Figueres. She's also a supporter of our initiative, and nice. She called herself an optimist, a stubborn optimist. And we have claimed and adopted that title and called ourselves the stubborn optimists. Because if you only fall in this notion of anxiety, which is very understandable and also absolutely logical as a consequence, it's very much more, it becomes very much more difficult to fight this battle that we're doing and fighting. So we're very optimistic in the sense that we look where we have come this far until now. The sky is the limit in that sense. Whatever we've done so far is already an amazing achievement, and future generations will build upon this. And for example, if the court case at the ICJ will be negative, it doesn't matter. We only need one judge with one dissenting opinion, and we can build an entire foundation upon that, and we can still sue every single government. So it's only going forward, and history has shown that the progressives have always won in the end. So we will win in the end, but it takes time, but we need that optimism and that support from each other, and we need to lean on each other's shoulders.
So my question is, how can we support each other in that?
You asked for a moment. Last year there was a difficult, very difficult discussion on agriculture and an agreement which didn't come. And during that process, we were organizing a meeting with farmers who wanted to and actively did change their way of working in a sustainable way. And one day I remember I got a phone with Farmer Piet. I thought, what, Farmer Piet, who is it? And he told what he was doing with his surrounding colleagues. And he said, but I need help. I think looking around, who needs help to go in the direction we all need to do and make it very specific what to do and where it helps. Well, we of course, we invited Farmer Piet. We had an interesting discussion. We wrote it down and went to the minister and said, well, there's lots of perspectives to be to be strengthened. So get on going.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Dieuwertje?
Yeah, for me, I really share Mert's attitude with we can really allow ourselves to fall into that like spiral of negativity. It's just not really gonna help anyone. So I love the stubborn optimism. I consider myself a stubborn optimist as well. But also it's really about finding the joy within the work, especially as a volunteer-based organization. I pull a lot of joy from working with my crew and with my people and keeping it fun and keeping it light and joking around at the office. It's why I come to the office and then I do the work. So yeah, it's allowing yourself to be joyful and be young and have fun with it. Yeah, there's also a lot of fun to be had.
Working on making agreements on climate change is fun. Yeah. You share a moment that you did feel like, yes, I am indeed that stubborn optimist.
A very interesting one. Actually, there's one last week. I was invited by. Should I share the story? I'm not sure. Yeah, okay.
Yes,
by
do
the by the embassy of a country that I will not name. Let's keep it like that. And that country was very adamant on our support to help them in doing work for them because they didn't participate in the written submissions, which means that they cannot read the submissions of other states. So the ambassador, we were in his office, asked me, well, you probably have information about the submissions of states. And I'm like, well, officially we have none. And he's like, could you help us in formulating an answer so we can also submit for the orals? I'm like, I'm not going to do your work for you if I don't get the confirmation that you're going to be aligned with what we want. And he was looking at me like straight face, was like mouth fallen like wide open. And then he said, wow, you guys are really diplomats in making. I'm like, no, we're not diplomats, we're activists. And we're stubborn optimists in that sense that we do not care about any flag or any allegiance of any country. We want to achieve our goals. And if you're not aligned with our goals, then you're a blockade. And in that sense, we do not work together. And it actually gave us more respect by that country. And now they've said, we would love to work together more often in the future. Which basically means that sticking to your morale, sticking to your ideals, can be very difficult.
Eyes on the ball.
Exactly, keep the eyes on the ball. Yeah, on the eyes on the prize.
Your role. And know your role.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, clear. Jantijn.
Yeah. So last year with Urgenda we organized the climate chain, which was designed actually as a way for people to join a low-key event. Publicly to come together and share concern about climate change. So we made a human chain along the Dutch coastline. And the funny thing about it was that 10 minutes before it happened, there was nothing to see. Maybe some people wearing a red shirt on the beach. We asked everyone to wear red because it would be a nice symbolic line at the coastline, right? Yeah. And then, all of a sudden, at the time that we communicated, everyone formed the line, and there was like this special moment because 10 minutes before you were there alone with your thoughts and the beach, right? And then all of a sudden, all of those people were there, and they actually came to the beach from all places in the country to share their concern and to meet with each other. And we got very, very much emails after that of people who went there who told us, well, what I really liked about it was the fact that you can actually connect and meet with other people sometimes who share your beliefs and your view. And I think moments like that, whether it's at a demonstration or even it's venues like this or at the beach, it is very important to keep that kind of events going and to join them once in a while. Yeah. To just
show up.
Yeah, but also for yourself to feel together in it, right? Yeah.
Thank you very much. Very nice. Last but not least, Nina.
Of course, it's very easy to say the day that we won Shell, but I have another one.
Nice.
There are a lot. I think if you're in the climate movement, whether you're a volunteer, an activist, or when you're working in the climate movement, there are a lot of inspiring and powerful moments. One thing, I think it was a couple of months ago when I was here at Pakhuis de Zwijger at some event, and afterwards someone came to me, and I will not tell you who it was.
Again, some anonymous
someone. Yeah. So Mileudefensie is not just campaigning on Shell, but on many companies that are big polluters. And this was a person working for one of these companies, and she told me she basically asked me, please sue us.
Well, that's indeed a very happy moment.
Yeah, and I think it was very funny. But it also shows that they are everywhere. So even within these companies,
Definitely.
and of course, you can have a very interesting discussion whether or not she should work there. But it also shows that it is not just in these rooms. It is not just people who are blocking highways or people who are going to these chains, but it is also people who are working in all different places that are concerned and somehow looking for a way to change something.
Yeah, yeah. Look beyond the name, look beyond the company,
Yeah.
and see the person actually behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of
okay.
course, it doesn't make the actions of this company right that there's one person working there.
No.
And I think she also knows. Otherwise, she wouldn't ask me if they could be the next one.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Let's all get up. Oh yeah, you want to ask something? Go ahead. You have a comment. Well, you can do it. Yeah.
My name's Julian. I'm a designer working with the Dutch climate delegation. And through my research, I came across a researcher in Hamburg who has done ethnographic research at climate conferences. And his conclusion is that within the closed-door meetings, there's certain scripts that are being perpetuated. And they're technical scripts, technocratic scripts. So solutions are translated into numbers and graphs. And then outside of these closed-door meetings where negotiations are happening, there are two types of other scripts, and that's hope and despair. Mm-hmm. And either you're on the hope side or on the despair side, or in the same speech, you use both. But that's basically it. So if we talk about narratives, and as a designer, I'm not designing objects, I'm designing processes and conversations. So if we're talking about narratives, right now we've got 3. And what I'm interested in is what are the other emotions, what are the other types of conversations that lead to different agreements? So, for example, maybe you know the cycles of grief. Just as a side note, in 2007, there were 16,000 species on the endangered species list. In 2023, that number tripled. So, let's talk about grief for a little bit. But the grief, the phases of grieving is denial, which could be a form of hope. Anger, which could also be a form of hope. Bargaining, depression, acceptance, and then what's called anticipatory grief. So in the conversation I'm trying to follow, I'm also trying to understand what other ways of speaking do we have that can also be powerful in bringing us elsewhere.
Can we get a big round of applause, first of all, for this other narrative? Thank you very much. Somebody likes to answer?
It's a difficult question. So, for example, when we talk about emotions, a lot of my colleagues are from the Pacific, and we only meet on Zoom, and maybe if we are lucky once a year at a conference, or if there's something that can be funded by a funder. But whenever we meet them, they tell us stories about what has happened on their islands or what has happened due to a climate catastrophe or climate event. But their despair has been a sort of a motivator for them, has been their fuel to engage even more thoroughly with this work. And in that sense, it almost feels like being very extremely privileged if I would be in despair in my comfortable situation here, when I know that what they're going through, their entire life, their entire existence, their culture is at stake.
Yeah. So they cannot get to that phase of acceptance.
Exactly. So in that sense, I don't feel like I have the right to be in despair because I simply cannot allow myself in respect to my peers and my colleagues to do so. And I feel like that's like the way in which emotions play a role, which doesn't mean that we do not feel those emotions often being very heavily as a burden upon us, but it also puts things into perspective on how to understand what we're doing and how we should go on forward.
Thank you very much. I think after this we could actually continue to talk about what could be other narratives that we could use to create maybe a more interesting or more hopeful or more whatever you want to call it voice. So I think it's nice that you bring this to the table because it could be interesting for someone to actually use this. Because it could also be that you, as a whatever person you are working in climate change, actually have a feeling that it gives more relevance to what you're doing if you're talking about grief, for example. I think it could be very useful. Let's get up one last time. Everybody, yeah. You can stay here, my speakers. Because we run a little bit out of time. I'm very sorry. We also started a little bit late. I'm hoping not disturbing anybody's evening. Last time to close your eyes. We all came here because apparently we care. We care about climate change, and in a certain extent we believe in making these agreements, and we would like to contribute to this process. And we've heard our speakers sharing these moments that actually give them more hope, make it more fun, really feel very confident in what you're doing, having a feeling of doing it together, people showing up to the things that you're organizing. And actually, seeing people you are creating cases against actually say, well, thank you very much for doing your job. Now, what role could you personally play in changing that system, in changing that process, in making agreements on climate change? What role could you personally play tomorrow to contribute, to improve that process of making agreements on climate change? Open your eyes. I'm going to run around. I'm not going to do everybody, but I'm hoping that you could share a little bit what you bring to your job, to your daily life tomorrow. Maybe you here in the back.
I'm giving non-violent direct action training at 6 o'clock at the University of Amsterdam.
Thank you very much. Very nice. Here?
I think, for me, it's about creating space for the researchers and everybody they work with to be able to collaborate on these things that they're the experts in and make sure that they can make those connections.
Thank you very much.
For me, it's like helping companies to implement our new nature's intelligence business model and become more sustainable.
Thank you very much. And you found a new job?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, create a new job which would force policymakers, but also industry sectors, to make the paradigm shift, because we're too slow in many respects. And
sorry?
We have to explain that energy is not a business model somehow. Yeah?
That's changing a very big paradigm. That's true, yeah.
But it is coming now. The next years, it's coming. No chance to stop it. And this is what societies are lacking, because no chance that, the governments are telling the truth, that a lot of people get unemployed and no new jobs will existing, powered with AI, but energy is a free good which can be managed. And then the paradigm shift is there, because a common sense principle, let the people behave different than on the existing panel, where, the companies like Shell, Petronas, if you go around the world, they're all the same names.
Thank you very much. Here?
Well, the story of Jantijn got me inspired about the future scenarios. That's something I've been doing within the energy transition for a while. It's not the field I'm in at this point, but it got me really enthused to get back to it at some point again, because I loved it. So thanks for sharing also the example that you gave earlier.
Thank you. That's so nice to hear. Thanks.
Cornelia.
Make more space within the cultural sector to actually take a more active role in facilitating all the imaginations we're going to need in order to build this world. Because of course, we're pushing down the old world. We're going to have to look around and be like, hey, who's left and what are we building?
Yes, what are we building? Scientist.
Well, well, I read once that I think research already contributes to climate change like 10 or 20% of the total amount, especially in plastics. And I know I use a lot of plastics for my research, so maybe a good way to reduce that amount and maybe recycle more in order to have less impact on the climate change.
Oh, that's a very practical thing you can do tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to move here. Last one.
Yeah, I think my job, finding solutions for companies to create commitment, I think that's an important one. So that's what I'm going to try and to do.
It is important, right? For commitment. How are you going to do that?
Yeah, just by thinking of new ideas and just like that are future-proof and taking them with me, and hopefully they find it also okay, so they will join me on the transition.
Last but not least, Nina.
Tomorrow we'll be talking to a very interesting platform that is specialized in engaging those voices that are often not heard, people in minority groups, and we will discuss how we can also improve our communication about the court case, that they can also feel part of it.
Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you very much for contributing to this beautiful evening. I hope to actually unexpectedly encounter you during Dutch Design Week to visit the beautiful project, Collaborations for Future. Thank you very much for coming.